Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We deeply appreciate you being here, being present. I know final season is coming, so definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn more about the GRE. My name is Loyola Rankin. I am one of the college success coaches with the American Indian College Fund, and I have with me Isaac Moore, graduate of Bard College and Harvard Graduate School of Education. Isaac, do you want to take some time to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Loyola. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's so nice to be here. I'm Isaac Moore. I'm from the Northern Cheyenne Nation in Montana, and I graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2021. That's where I met Loyola, and we have been working together ever since then. I have been working in education for a long time now, and I currently am based in New York City at Columbia Business School, where I work in MBA admissions. And I did pick the GRE at one point in my life, so I'm excited to share a bit about my story and offer you some insight and some tips about that particular test. Thank you all for joining. It's so nice to share space with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Isaac, for being here. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to do 20 minutes where I will do the basic overview of the graduate record examinations, otherwise known as the GRE. And then we'll conclude with 30 minutes of personal experience from Isaac. He's going to share preparing for, taking, and understanding the GRE from a personal experience. And then we'll have questions and answers at the end of the presentation. The goal is to inform y'all attendees the basics of taking the GRE. It can seem daunting. You might not even have time to look at the website, which is totally fine. This is just an introduction. Those who may be curious or those who are planning and gearing up to take the GRE. And this is just a sharing personal experience to better prepare for the exam and some things to consider. So whatever point you are in your academic journey, you are welcome. Any questions you may have, please feel free to throw in the chat or save them until the end of the presentation to ask aloud. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. What is the GRE? Besides very daunting. So the GRE is actually has been split up into two separate tests. The first is the general testing, which you may be familiar with. And then there is the special subjects testing. So the general testing is for general graduate schools, business, law school programs. This section is typically around your any type of broad scope graduate school admissions. So if you're planning on going into a fine arts major and they are asking for the GRE, you're going to take the general. If you're thinking about business, law school has just recently started accepting the GRE. Before you had to take the LSAT. But now they're accepting the GRE. So that's the general type of testing that and it's a wide base as well. So testing time in total is about 2 hours, not including breaks. So really expect to take about like 2.5 hours, close to, 2.5 hours for the testing time. And the scores are valid for 5 years from your test date. Now, the GRE special subjects are special subjects, just like it says. These are knowledges in mathematics, physics, and psychology. So if that's your current major and if that's what you're thinking of going to grad school for, mathematics, physics, or psychology, you will be taking the GRE special subject. The testing time is different for this test. Math, you're looking at about 3 hours, not including scheduled breaks. Physics and psychology, you are about 2 hours, just like the general one. Um, the same thing is valid here. Scores are valid for 5 years from your testing date. So this is definitely where you want to decide what type of graduate school program you're looking for and where you want to go. Are you going to be taking the general testing, or are you going to take the special subject testing? When you are looking at grad school programs, this might be something you can ask your admissions counselor, which one that they would prefer that you take. And they can have a little bit more detail on what they're looking for from the GRE. Okay, so focusing in right now on the general testing side, this is split up into 3 sections. We're looking at analytical writing, verbal reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. Number of questions. The first one for the analytical writing is just one writing subject. So really it's a writing sample. And you have 30 minutes to write a response to analyze an issue like this task. So they're going to propose a kind of like a scenario, and you will analyze the issue and do a write-up of your opinion. Most likely you would think of this as like persuasive arguing or reasoning, deductive reasoning. That's going to look like your analytical writing. Verbal reasoning, there are 2 sections within this section. 12 questions in the first section for 18 minutes, a lot of time. So really, can you answer 12 questions in 18 minutes? That definitely varies. And then section 2 there, you see it's 15 questions in 23 minutes. So you can kind of like see the verbal reasoning of that second section. You nearly have twice as much time well, that's not twice, sorry, that's 5 extra minutes to answer 3 additional questions. So you can kind of reason out that that second section is going to be a little bit of a heavy lift. And then finally, in that quantitative reasoning, 12 questions in 21 minutes, and then 15 questions in 26 minutes. So these are it's a timed exam. If you leave a section blank and you run out of time, you run out of time, unfortunately. So just looking at this breakdown of the sections, of the time, of the amount of questions they're going to be asking, especially if you have to like write and analyze at the beginning, we can kind of deduce that this is going to take a lot of brain power. So moving on, this section here is the breakdown of the GRE special subject testing. So for math, if that's the area that you're looking at, you will have 66 multiple choice questions. The content area is 50% algebra, 50% calculus, 25% algebra, and then 25% additional topics. So this could be anything inside of math. All of this you should learn in your undergraduate classes. So definitely keep that in mind when you are looking at what you should be learning as far as like calculus, algebra. This could be additional topics, could include like trig, could include, what's the other one? The other math one I can't remember right now. And then the one there below, physics, you have 70 questions with each question having 5 multiple choice options. Here you can see the breakdown of the different types of physics related questions that they're going to ask you inside of this space. A lot of it, you really have to be strategic in what you're going to be studying. So as you can see, the classical mechanics is 20%. Electromagnetism is 18%. So those are going to be the areas that you might want to study more up on, just because that's a higher percentage of what they're going to be asking you as far as questions go. Same thing with quantum mechanics. They're at 13% as well. And then finally, psychology. This is 144 questions. Each question has 5 choices to choose from in the multiple choice section. And here they were very helpful in breaking down the number of questions, not by percentage, by actual numbers. So you can see here, 30 questions are going to be biology related. Cognitive questions, there's 29 questions related to that. Breaking it down, developmental, social, and clinical. So if we look at these types of questions, how many they're asking, what they're asking, and then going back to that first slide, in how long it's going to take, you can realize again that mental capacity to answer questions quickly inside of this short time sprint is going to be very imperative. So definitely think of that when you are considering like, when's a good time to take the exam? Is it going to be morning? Is it going to be like afternoon? Is it going to be later in the evening? So consider those things when you are gearing up to take the GRE. Okay, so we have a couple of things around uh, testing fees. This is the big one, right? So we want to see like how many fees are going to be, what's the cost? So for both the GRE general test and the subject test, again, that's that math, physics, and psychology, it's $150 per attempt. So you want to make sure that first off, like if you are planning on taking both the general and the subject-based one, that you are accounting that and budgeting that in this space. The great thing about this is that you can send your score results to 4 separate graduate institutions as part of your testing fee. So 4 different graduate programs you can apply to. Anything outside of that, additional scores you want to send out, that's going to be $50 fee. It's a little bit better. The LSAT, you only got to send it to 1 graduate school program and thereafter had to pay a fee. So the GRE is a little better than the LSATs in that you get to send it to 4 separate institutions. That's included in that $150 testing fee. Now, if you should need to reschedule your GRE test, if you need to change the testing center, again, if you need to send those score results to other institutions or other colleges, it is a $50 fee. So keep that in mind again, when you are planning that you don't want to be changing the dates too often, you don't want to change your testing center. And this could be even moving from an online test into like a physical location test. And then additionally sorry, the scores per recipient is $35, not $50. It's there at the bottom, my bad. So you get 4 for free, and then thereafter you get $35 per score. Sorry, not per score, per recipient you'd like to send it to. So keep that in mind. Again, when you are applying to grad schools, like if you're planning on applying to 10 different grad schools, that might add up over time. So keep that in mind when you're looking at and planning for your higher ed experience. Okay, so the GRE does not have a fee waiver. They do have a fee reduction voucher. Which is pretty interesting, I thought. So the GRE fee reduction voucher for the GRE general test, again, that's for all the subjects. They can only reduce it to $100. But you do get practice tests as part of the fee reduction voucher. So that's helpful. In addition, if you are planning on taking the GRE subject test, they do have a 50% reduction. So you're only paying 75%, sorry, $75 for the GRE subject test. Again, that's the math, physics, and psychology based test. To qualify for a fee reduction voucher, they have 3 separate categories to qualify. First one there is financial aid. Sorry, financial need. If you're receiving financial aid and your FAFSA student aid report, the SAR report, has a parental contribution of less than $2,700 your senior year, you do qualify for fee reduction voucher. Or if you're receiving financial aid and you're self-supporting and have a SAR report that shows a contribution of less than $3,200. So if you're independent inside of your financial aid, as long as your SAR report is less than 3,200, you do qualify for a financial need fee reduction voucher. The other option here is if you're unemployed. You need to be currently unemployed and have become unemployed within the past 6 months and submit a copy of an unemployment benefit statement from the past 90 days. This one is pretty interesting. I've never really seen like fee reduction or fee waivers based on employment status, so I thought that was pretty cool. And then finally, if you're in a program that supports underrepresented groups, you could be eligible for a fee reduction voucher. So if you're part of the Gates Millennium Scholars, Institute for Recruitment of Teachers, the IRT, Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science, SACNAS. If you're a TRIO Student Support Services program, I know Haskell has a TRIO support as well as Bay Mills and SKC. So if you are part of the TRIO program at your college, you do qualify for the fee reduction voucher. So definitely take a look at your college institutions and see if there are programs in which you can join for that fee reduction voucher. There are other programs as well, and then the application you can also find on the GRE website. Okay, so in addition, requesting accommodations. So if you need accommodations to take the GRE, please note that if you do receive accommodations, they will notify you 2 weeks before your exam. So they expect you to have that well in advance. So make sure you're making those requests as soon as possible. They first ask you to review the policy and procedure. That's the GRE information bulletin. It is a PDF version that you can find on the website. Just to make sure that the policies and procedures of what you are allotted can help your application, which is that second option there of testing accommodation request form. This information, it's a lengthy application. I took a look through it. It's roughly like 7 pages, and some of them do require doctor's statements. So if you are requesting accommodations, please make sure that you have that documentation and are comfortable sharing it. And then finally, once you're approved, there's a separate registration process. It's the GRE Test Authorization Request Voucher Form for test takers with disabilities or health-related needs. It's a very long title. And this basically is allotting you the different types of accommodations and making sure the test centers that you are planning on going to, if you want to go to a test center or if you want to take the test online virtually, or at home, that those are options made available to you. So the different types of accommodations you can request for is extended testing time. The tests are timed, so there is no option to like have an unlimited time slot. I know some college accommodations do allow for unlimited time, but this one definitely needs to be timed. And please note when you do a testing accommodation of extended time, that also means that you are taking longer to complete the test, and you want to make sure that your brain capacity to like do all these questions for that extended period of time has proper conditioning. If you should need extra breaks, accommodations for computer delivered tests, if you need a human reader, a human scribe, an oral interpreter, sign language interpreter, assistance for note taking, alternate test formats, large print test books, recorded audio. Those are all options to request for in accommodations. But please note, some of these accommodations are only for applicants who are legally deaf or hard of hearing, or blind, or have low vision. So if you do not qualify for them, they will not allow you to have them, unfortunately. But again, if you need to make those accommodation requests, please do so as early as possible. Okay, so you took the test, you did fantastic. So now we're going through a section on understanding your score. So first off, there is the raw score. This is the number of questions answered correctly. The wrong answers do not detract from the overall score, so that's definitely very helpful. Any answers you get wrong, they don't deduce, so you're perfectly fine answering them. So for the general exam, you're looking at quantitative reasoning. The score range is like 130 to 170. Verbal reasoning is 130 to 170 as well. Analytical writing, that's that writing sample that you do in 30 minutes. It's a score of 0 to 6 in 0.5 increments. And then for the physics, psychology, and math GRE scores, they range from 200 to 990 in 10-point increments. So this is important to know in like the raw score element. You might hear people say like, well, I got a 300 on my GRE, and just keep in mind that that is the raw score, and not the overall what they might send to your academic institutions. Then they have the total scaled score. Now, this one you might have heard of in like percentiles. And this one, they're really looking at how you did compared to the overall group. So this one you might have heard of people talk about the curve or the bell curve. And so this is like in relation to like everybody who's possibly ever taken the GRE and where you fall in that range, if that makes sense. So what they do is they take your raw score and convert it into a total scaled score. And this shows the different percentiles of where you landed. So you could get a high score, but technically you're still in the 50th percentile. So how this works is that the 75th percentile is where you want to be. And this is here in the 50th is where like the average is for like generally everybody lands. And then the 25th percentile is there at the end. So it's kind of on the lower end of where everybody took the score. Now this could be helpful in ways in which like more people who scored low in the general year could lower the percentile and like shift it. Or if you got a people who got perfect scores throughout, it like shifts it the other way. So unfortunately, it could go either way depending on how everybody else did in relation to how you did. When you look at admissions processes, they might be based on percentile and not so much on your raw score. So they might not say like you need to score 330 in your GRE. They might say we need you to be at the 60th percentile or above. So keep that in mind when you're looking at application processes in the GRE, and how that relates to what they're asking for. And then finally, for the physics and psychology tests, only these two, they release percent scores, percent correct scores indicated on questions answered correctly within a particular content area. So what does that mean? They will break down all your answered scores by these areas and say how many from 0 to 100 did you get right in these areas. So for example, if you're looking at a psychology program that's more cognitive based and cognitive research, they want to see what number of questions you got correct in the cognitive area as opposed to like clinical. because maybe the program doesn't do clinical and they don't really care about that, but they're really focusing in on the cognitive. Same thing for the physics. If you're looking at more like special relativity instead of like electromagnetism, they may be more focused in on this area than other areas. So that's why they break it down for these particular special subjects. And again, that's called the percent correct scores in content areas, and that's only for the physics and the psychology exams. Okay, so this is generally what your score is going to look like. This is what they release. And it'll say like, this is the general one. It'll have your information here at the top. The test date, as you can see, this one was taken in 2018. And so it'll say, you know, where you scored in sections. So like that verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, analytical writing. Again, that's that essay. This person scored a 4.5 and ended up in the 82nd percentile, but their quantitative reasoning, although they got a good score, 161, it's in the 77th percentile. So it definitely drops down in percentile compared to who else took the test. And then finally here, you can see like the score of 164 is in the 94th percentile. So based on this, it would say that this person did better in verbal reasoning than their counterparts who also took the exam. So those are things that'll like, that's kind of like what that means in that area. Again, it just breaks it down into percentiles in a different format here. And then it says here who you are sending the test scores to, and this person sent it to Baltimore something, I can't read that. So this is kind of like a sample of what it looks like. Okay, so this part was pretty interesting. The score select option. So if you've taken the GRE multiple times, this is where you want to pay attention to like score select option. So on the test day, after you take the test, you get to review your scores at the testing center. They grade it quickly. There's no waiting around. You don't have to wait 48 hours. After you're done with the test, they're like, boom, here are your scores. At that time, you can choose not to send your scores to those colleges, or you can select to send the options to 4 free score reports. You can send the most recent, the one that you just took that day, or you can send all your previous scores. So again, let's pretend you took the GRE 5 times. This is your 5th time you've taken it. You want to send, do you want to send all your scores or just your most recent? So that's the question that they're asking on the test day. You get to decide if you're like, oh, I didn't do so well, I'm not going to send them the score. Or you could say like, here's all my scores, so you know I'm getting better, if that's what's happening for your score results. After the test day, so let's say the next day, you can send your score reports for a fee and select from the options of most recent, the one you just took, send all your scores from the past 5 years, or send any. You send the scores from one or as many as you'd like. Like, let's say you took it yesterday, 2019, and 2020. Those are the only 3 you want to send. You took it like the other 2 didn't do so well, whatever. You only want to send those 3 scores, you can. You do not have that option on the test day. It's either send it once or send them all. So after the test day, you do have to pay a fee, but you can cherry pick which ones you want to send. So again, just depending on what your strategy is and what you've talked with your admissions counselor at your grad school program, what they're looking for, either option might be more beneficial to you in your application. Now, this one is interesting too. So I pulled this straight from the website. All this information is on the website. I just kind of condensed it down into a manageable bite pieces because like the GRE website was very difficult to navigate personally. It was just like, why is this all scattered over? So this is like condensed version. You can find more information on the website for sure. This section was interesting. Some programs require applicants to take the GRE test more than once and to report all of their GRE test scores. So again, make sure you're paying attention to like what it is they're asking for. If they have a minimum of like, you need to take the GRE 3 times and send us all your test scores, be prepared to take it 3 times and send all your test scores. And again, the tests are $150 a piece. So like, how are we mapping this out? How are we financially paying for these things? Verify the GRE score reporting requirements with your admissions office, or if you are applying to a fellowship, ask them what specifically they are asking for. You don't want to overpay, but you also don't want to lose out on opportunity because you didn't send the proper number of tests if they are asking that you take it multiple times. So those are the options for sending out your test. It definitely gets pretty confusing there at the end, but completely understandable. And it'll start to make more sense once you go through the process, for sure. Okay, so this is a event that I found on the GRE website. It's looking at the GRE general test. This is going to be taking place December 7th, 2023. So that's coming up. It starts 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern time. That is 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Mountain time. So if you're in like Denver area, Arizona, New Mexico, like if you're in Mountain time, this is starting at 7 a.m. If you're in Pacific time, this is starting at 6 a.m. So if you are interested in hearing more about the GRE general test, they are hosting a 3-hour web series for this test exam. And I'll drop the link in the chat. Okay, so I will turn it over to Isaac. I drop that in the chat.
Okay, awesome. I hope everyone can see this. I hope you all can hear me. Right.
We can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. My internet gets spotty sometimes. Yeah, so once again, I'm really happy to be here with you all to talk about my experience taking the GRE. So my plan is to just sort of reflect on the experience, talk about how I approach the exam, being very candid, and then I will go into some like prep tips and some guidance that I have sort of based on, you know, reflecting back on my time and having this space to think about that experience from this this time and this perspective. So I hope this is helpful, and please feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. I'm very happy to speak more about that as we move along. Okay, so I took the general GRE test. I took it in 2018 when I applied to the Harvard Graduate School of Education for a master's in education. And quite honestly, the thought of taking the GRE was very overwhelming. It was quite frankly nerve-wracking and intense. I personally am not a great test taker, but you know, this was something that had to be done, and so begrudgingly, I prepared and did my best. At least I like to think so. In order to get into the program that I wanted to be at. And I think one thing that I really want to highlight is that it's okay to feel overwhelmed or feel stressed or anxiety around these tests. You know, these are such big, important things that can really affect one's life and one's trajectory. And so, it's okay to feel a little bit, nervous or anxious about this, but that is part of the process. So I just want to highlight it's important to sit with your feelings as you think about taking this journey. So one thing that was really stressful for me in particular was just the prepping. When I first started planning to take the GRE, I thought, oh my gosh, how do I prepare for this exam? How do I schedule my time? How do I find space in my life to carve out time to focus on the writing, the verbal, and the quant? And what I found helpful was to, allot some time each week to focus on GRE prep. For me, that was the weekends and maybe a couple evenings a week. And added to that, I also found it helpful to study with a friend. I had a friend who was also taking the GRE at the same time as me. And so we would meet up together at my apartment or at the library and, study together, take breaks, talk about our feelings, talk about our stresses. It really made the process seem less daunting, having someone there who was going through the same intense preparation period as myself. Overall, I spent about 3 to 4 months studying. That might be a bit more than average. I think most people study for around 2 to 3 months. I spent a bit more because I was nervous. I had been out of college for more than 5 years. I was really nervous around the quant section of the exam in particular, because I was a history major in college, very social sciences and humanities focused. And while I did well in math, it definitely wasn't my strong point. So I was very scared around the quant section of this. And so I spent about 3 to 4 months studying. I utilized the Princeton Review practice exams quite heavily. They were very, very helpful. They have free exams on their website. I purchased their GRE prep book, which was really, really great. It gives you practice questions, practice essays, very, very helpful. And I took multiple exams. I was at home, I would time myself, just to really get a good sense of what the actual exam would feel like. It did really help my anxiety and my ability to, manage time, because this test really is about time management in a lot of ways. And so over the course of 3 to 4 months, I dedicated time like each week to practicing, to studying, vocabulary review, learning how to, or not learning how to, but rather, refreshing my skills on critical and close reading. That is a big part of the exam too. And then really for me, it was about delving into the quants. I, pulled out some of my old college notes from math class. I really had to get my head in the books for this. But over the course of 3 to 4 months, I would say on average, I studied about, 5 to 6 hours a week. This was my personal experience. Yes. And so the day of the exam, quite honestly, it was very scary. I took the exam in Boston. You arrive at the center, and it is a little bit intense. It almost felt like going through TSA at the airport. You do go through a security scanner. So you're like, your X-ray to make sure you're not bringing in any things that might help you. They removed my glasses and inspected them to make sure I wasn't hiding anything in the lenses. It definitely was an intense process. And so I just want to share that with you because no one had sort of told me about that. And when I arrived, it did feel like I was visiting like a jail or going through TSA at an airport, which was kind of disorienting, but I think they have those measures in place because of cheating or people trying to get around, the rules and regulations. And so during the exam, I did my best. I was there for about 3 hours. I believe the GRE has changed since I took it, so I think it's a bit shorter now, but I was there for around 3 hours. It flew by very quickly, honestly. It was pretty interesting to have prepared so much for this exam. And then have it go by very quickly because you're so focused on the different sections and the different components of the exam itself. And after I finished, I took myself out for chocolate. I'm a big chocolate person. And so I needed something to just like de-stress, to relax. And so I really encourage anyone taking the exam to practice a lot of self-care afterwards. This is a really big and scary and can be an intense ordeal. And so I think having patience with yourself and being, being careful about your well-being is really important as well. So I'm hoping what I shared with you about my own experience is helpful. And now I'm going to sort of walk through some of the tips and some of the resources and guidance that I think would be really helpful for anyone taking the exam. So I hope this is good information for you all. Okay, so here's some general guidance that I've sort of been thinking about as I prepared for tonight's presentation on how you can make this a positive experience. So as I mentioned before, I think it's really helpful to, acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to feel overwhelmed and nervous. That's normal. That's human being. It's our nature. And so, sit with your feelings and acknowledge them as you prepare. I think that will really be helpful. And building on that, folks in education, we all know that standardized tests have inequities built into them, and they really reflect larger systemic inequalities in our society around access and resources. So I think it's helpful, especially for Native people, to contextualize this exam within that system, right? And it can help you feel more at ease. This is just one thing out of many things, that you're going to be doing. At least that for me, it was helpful to try to see this as one sort of process, one barrier that I was breaking down. Secondly, I think it's also important to remind yourself that this exam and the exam results do not define your ability and intelligence. Definitely they do not. This is one data point out of many that tell your story. And the exams do not in any way quantify who you are, your innate abilities, and your skills. So keeping that perspective in mind can really keep you grounded throughout the process. And lastly, as Native people, we all know how important our families and our communities are. So I would encourage you to include them in this process. Talk to your family and your friends about this endeavor. Surround yourself with encouraging people. I think it's important to have cheerleaders, on the sidelines supporting you along the way. Find a study buddy, if that's your thing, someone who is also applying to graduate school who can provide some moral support throughout this process. So here are some general preparation tips that I've sort of thought of. I kind of touched on a few of these when I spoke about my personal experience, but I just want to dive a bit deeper here into these. So as I mentioned, consistency really is key. You really need to be able to feel comfortable with the layout and the timing of the exam. So, I would encourage you to spend at least 2 months of preparation. That will really be helpful. in terms of your knowledge of what the exam will feel like and be like, but also in terms of just being prepared generally and feeling more comfortable. Timing is very critical. All the sections, as Loyola mentioned, they're all timed. So you really need to get comfortable with being fast, with working under pressure, with taking an exam within those time limits. I would encourage you to take at least 2 timed practice tests. One is good, but definitely at least do 2. Like that will give you more comfortability with the exam, help you improve. I think absolutely definitely take at least 2 practice tests. As I mentioned, I utilize Princeton Review. They have a lot of free resources online. So there's a link to their website. Kaplan also has a lot of stuff as well. I did not use their materials, but I've heard good things about them as well. Again, really being consistent here with the preparation. It will pay off in the end. 2 to 3 months can seem like a long time, but I guarantee you it will be very helpful when the exam time comes around. And then lastly, I would say, like plenty of rest the day before. Don't go out partying the night before the exam, get some rest. And honestly, like I didn't study the day before the exam. I just put away my books. I watched movies. I didn't think about the exam at all, gave my brain a break. And that actually really helped me because I had studied so much that it was all in my head and I knew it when the exam time came. So essentially, don't cram. It's not going to work for this exam. It might work in college for papers or projects, but it's definitely not going to work for something like the GRE. I think this is also an important thing to consider. And I included this slide because I work in admissions now. So I work at Columbia Business School. I read applications, I evaluate applications, and help make decisions on who we admit. And so in thinking about tonight's presentation, I thought it would also be helpful to include this and, sort of talk about how you can connect the exam to where you're going and where you want to go for graduate school. As Loyola mentioned earlier, there are 2 different exams you can take. There's the general and then there's the subjects. And sort of along those lines, it can be helpful if you think about what your goal is and sort of use that as a guiding point for your exam preparation. Of course, you want to do well on the exam generally, right? You want to get a good score that shows your readiness for graduate school. That'll help you be admitted to the program that you're aiming for. However, I really think it's also good to keep in mind that about your future goals when you're preparing for the GRE itself. So for example, on this slide, if you're applying to an MBA program, right, a Master's of Business Administration, you're probably going to want to score pretty well on the quantitative section, right? You want to prove to the admissions committee that you are ready for the quantitative coursework in the program. So with that in mind, it might not be so horrible if you didn't score the best score in the verbal or on the writing, So I think it might be helpful for people to, consider these things as you prepare for the exam. And also it just might alleviate some stress, right? Like it's very rare that people get perfect scores, and, it's definitely a feat. And so, sort of think about this strategically. What do you need to really score highly on that will be helpful for you in the admissions process? And the same goes for like a non-quantitative program, right? If your goal is to get into a PhD program in literature, if you do kind of poorly on the quant, probably not going to hurt you, but you want to ensure that you're doing really well on the other parts of the test. And I sort of utilize this slide because I work in MBA admissions, but also in my personal experience, as I mentioned before, I applied to a master's in education. I did very, very well on the writing and on the verbal, but I I did less well on the quants. I didn't do poorly, but I did less well. But it didn't really matter because I was very strong in the other ways that the program needed me to be strong. So I just hope this kind of gives you some broader context about how you can see this test and how you can frame it within your overall your goals and where you want to end up. All right, so exam day rolls around. Very exciting. So as I mentioned before, arrive early to the test center if you're going in person. It's very important. There's a lot of like administrative procedures that happen. So definitely arrive early. The ETS, which is the program or the company that runs the GRE, they don't run on Indian time. So definitely arrive early. Secondly, my other tip for exam day would be to be mindful of time while you're taking the test. So say you're taking the exam, you come across a question that is very difficult or tough, you're kind of stumped. Instead of wasting time trying to figure it out, flag it and move on to the next one, right? You can save that answer or that question until the end and go back to it if you have time. As Loyola mentioned, the goal really is to answer as many correct questions as possible. And with the clock ticking, that becomes a challenge. So just definitely be mindful of time as you're moving through each section. Thirdly, actually, try not to worry about making mistakes, whether that's on a singular question or a specific section. Just focus on what's in front of you and then move forward. As I said earlier, skip the hard ones and save them for last. I think the breaks might have been removed, but during my time when I took the GRE, there were 2 breaks. We had a 1-minute break in between sections, and then we had a 10-minute break after the 3rd section. I use those. Some people don't. I found them really helpful. For the 10-minute break, I actually left the exam room. I went for a quick walk in the center, grabbed a drink of water, stepped away from the computer. That actually really helped me to just sort of reset, recharge, and regroup. I want to sort of briefly jump into the analytical writing section. I think things might have changed. When I took the exam, there were 2 essays. I believe there's only 1 now, but for my sake, I'll just talk through my experience here. So when I took the exam, I had to write 2 essays. The first one was around analyzing an issue. And so, there was a prompt that was there. And this part of the test is really trying to get you to be able to analyze an issue and articulate a point of view or an argument with evidence and reasoning to support your claim. And so what's really important with this essay is to be persuasive and critical. You really want to convince the people who's reading this essay that, you are right and that you can really support your claim with evidence and reasoning. It doesn't need to be overly poetic. You're not writing a novel here. I think it's important to be concise and clear, but also be persuasive. Excuse me. The effective argument essay, this was really fun. This essay, I had to look at a short piece of writing, look at what the author was saying and assess and evaluate their argument and deduce whether or not I felt that it was sufficient. So you're looking, this essay in particular really requires you to utilize your critical thinking, critical assessment skills, really teasing out what is the main point here, what's the argument, are they sufficiently supporting that? And then you reflect on all of that and state your stance. And again, you need to be very clear. You don't need to be overly wordy, but it's important to be very clear and precise. And so what I found really helpful for this part of the exam, sort of my strategy, was I read the prompt and I spent about 5 minutes. I had a notepad with me. You'll have notepads on the day of the exam if you're inside the center. And I spent about 5 minutes quickly jotting down some notes, making a rough outline of what I wanted to, write, very just quickly. And then I utilized that to formulate my writing. I think it's really important right here to stick to the classic sort of formula of the essay. You have your introduction, state what you're going to state, move into the evidence, discussion, reasoning, and then conclude it. That will get you very, very far in this section of the exam. And then lastly, I would say that quality and quantity both matter. Be concise. So, get to the point, don't meander for ever, but also be persuasive, right? You really want to make sure that you're fully answering the question and the prompt. If you write a lot, but you're not actually really answering, you're going to lose points. Length does matter as well. I believe it's been shown that essays that are longer actually score a lot higher than short essays. So if you are taking the exam and you sort of see that you have 10 minutes left and your essay is one paragraph, you might want to go back and sort of think how you can make it a bit longer and more persuasive. And the lastly, I would say be mindful of errors. Of course, like people commit errors, it's fine, but just something to be mindful of as well as you're working through the section. All right, quick drink of water. So the verbal reasoning section, this was my favorite. I really love this. It was a lot of fun. I have a background in the humanities and the social sciences, so this was my place to shine. So it's essentially testing like two main sort of skills, like your vocabulary, like how much do you know, your use of language, your knowledge of language. And then secondly, it's also testing your reading and comprehension skills. And so for the vocab, I think one thing that's really helpful is just to read, like learn new words. So you learn vocabulary through encountering new texts, new words. So maybe like you'll want to just read some novels, read nonfiction, read some academic writing, read the news, etc. This can be a really fun part, actually. Just like by reading, you can jot down words that you don't know, memorize them, define them. The Princeton Review has a whole list of vocabulary that might be on the GRE or words that are similar to words on the GRE. So that would be very, very helpful. Personally, I utilized flashcards. I'm a big fan of flashcards. I'm very old-fashioned that way, but it works for me. I wrote words down on one side, the definition on the other, practice. That took me very, very far. With the advent of like AI, there are also all these amazing apps out there now that can help you with setting up digital flashcards to help you like even more quickly learn new vocab, new concepts, new ideas. There's an app here that I know one of my friends is using now for something different, not the GRE. It's called Anki, and it utilizes AI to help you like more quickly identify the points or the words or the concepts that you need to spend more time on in order to sufficiently master them. So that's one thing that I would encourage you to think about. And then on the reading and comprehension section, what is really going to help you here is to really learn how to learn or practice. So I'm sure all of you know how to do this, but just really practice how to quickly summarize a main idea or argument in a passage. This will be really, really helpful because this section is really getting at your ability to quickly look at a text and understand it and answer questions correctly. So critical close reading is a really good practice on this part of the exam. All right, so my least favorite part of the GRE, the quant section. I don't have too much to say here, but these are some things that I actually found helpful when I was doing the exam. So I believe that the general GRE is really mathematics focused, at least from what I remember. It was pretty math focused. We didn't have physics or bio or anything like that. It was mostly just math. So what I found helpful, in addition to the GRE prep with the Princeton review, is I actually went back to my college math notes and my homework and even my high school math notes because I save everything and I'm like a crazy person. And I actually found that to be very, very helpful, especially with calculus and algebra, which I hadn't taken in like, 10 years or something. So for me, that was very, very helpful. Again, sort of the same points I'd made before on the other sections. It's really about practice, really just delving in and committing to spending time to get more comfortable if you need to, or if you're really comfortable with this, just learning to just do the math part very, very quickly within the allotted time that you're allowed. I think the quant part of the test overall is the hardest, or it can be the hardest, because mathematics, it's very it's hard science, right? It's heavy. Writing an essay is one thing, knowing an equation is a different thing. Like it has a finite answer, and the ways in which like an argument can be this or that. Mathematics is more definite. And so for some people, this can be very, very challenging. For me personally, was quite challenging. But I think really preparing and committing to the time will help you get through this. One thing that I want to note for the strategy on this section is it's really important to be aware that this exam is really, especially in the quantitative section, is really trying to trick you into choosing the wrong answer. It's really, really important to make sure that you're aware of that. So the way that I approached this section was like utilizing the process of elimination. So for example, if there was a question that came up and I looked at it, may have been a little bit stumped, but maybe knew some of it, I would look at the answers and I would sort of deduce, which one of these is not logical, does not make sense. So that you X those out, and then within that order, you can get to potentially the right answer. So that's definitely a strategy to use, the process of elimination. And sort of building on the trick thing that I mentioned just now, be mindful of easy answers. If there's an answer that seems fairly easy and you're like, wow, that was so quick, maybe take a second look at that and sort of really think about it, because in this section, they're actually really trying to trick you to choose the wrong answer. I remember that sometimes some of the equations, like the negative signs would be placed differently, in some of the math problems to try to like trip you up. So it's really important to keep your eyes peeled and to be really mindful within this part of the exam. All right, you finish the exam, you're feeling great. It's important to take care of yourself. So I really, really deeply encourage that anyone taking the exam, do some self-care. Treat yourself to something nice. Take a moment to breathe and to celebrate the fact that you've completed this really big deal. Congratulate yourself on finishing. This is a really important test, and it's difficult, and it has taken a lot of time for you to get to that place. So celebrate it. Take a moment to just, take care of yourself. And I would really encourage you to do something that makes you happy. And lastly, just some important reminders that I touched on before, but I cannot highlight these enough. So first, you are more than your GRE score. This exam does not define you. It does not tell the story of who you are. It really is one data point out of many that universities are looking at when they do their admissions process. Most universities utilize a holistic review. So they're looking at you in the context of who you are, what you've done, your achievements, where you're from. And the standardized test really is just one data point that speaks about you. It is not the definitive representation of who you are. And secondly, you can always take the exam again. Say you got a bad score, say you didn't do well, say something came up. You can always try again. This is not the end all be all of your process, your application to graduate school. So I think it's just really important to remember those two things. You can always try again, and then this is not defining of who you are.